The return of military expenditures to the public treasury was one of a series of reforms enacted by Emperor Yongzheng. According to the TV drama, Yongzheng Dynasty, this policy effectively enriched the national treasury and prevented local officials from being corrupt. So what exactly is the return of military expenditures to the public treasury, and did it completely solve the problem after being returned to the public treasury? In ancient China, agriculture was the main industry, and the collection of agricultural taxes revolved around land and population. Generally, farmers needed to pay the poll tax and land tax, which remained unchanged for a long time. However, the amount of tax paid varied at different times. After the implementation of the single whip method in the Ming Dynasty, it was stipulated that farmers' taxes should be converted into silver, which was also adopted by the Qing Dynasty. However, there was a problem. The farmers themselves had little money and needed to sell their grain for copper coins or market silver. If it was copper coins, they needed to be exchanged for market silver before being used to pay taxes. The impurities in market silver were different from those in official silver. When local officials collected taxes, they needed to refine this market silver into standard official silver, leading to losses. The court would not bear these losses itself, but instead compensated for them by increasing the tax by an additional 20%. Similar to silver, the grain and other items handed in by farmers would suffer losses due to insufficient drying, loss of moisture during storage, and being eaten by mice. The court would not bear these losses itself, so an additional 20% was added when collecting the grain. This is the origin of hua, fire, and hao, consumption. In fact, if local officials were more careful in collecting and storing taxes and grain, the losses from hua and hao would not be significant, at least not reaching 20%. So why did the court turn a blind eye to this? This was actually a way for the court to indirectly allow officials to benefit. Out of the additional 20% in taxes, 10% was generally used to subsidize the losses from hua and hao, and the remaining 10% went into the pockets of the local officials. After all, the superiors only required the local officials to hand in the taxes in full. As long as the local officials followed this approach, the farmers could also accept it, and the officials could line their pockets. Perhaps it was due to human greed that these officials not only increased the tax collection amount in private but also used means such as concealing and falsifying reports from their superiors. This behavior of both superiors and subordinates made life difficult for the lower class, and the court could not collect sufficient taxes, preventing the execution of many important national matters. The return of military expenditures to the public treasury implemented by Yongzheng was fundamentally aimed at ensuring the normal collection of national taxes. In other words, the originally overcharged 20% tax would now be owned by the state. Theoretically, after deducting the normal losses from hua and hao, the national tax revenue would increase by nearly 10% per year, which was a considerable income. This approach directly hurt the local officials' small treasury, which is why it faced opposition from many officials. However, Yongzheng did consider this issue. Along with the return of military expenditures to the public treasury, he also provided yanglianenzi, a form of subsidy in addition to the normal salary, which indirectly enriched the officials and served as compensation. For these officials, the amount of yanglianenzi was much less compared to the benefits from hua and hao going into their private pockets. Moreover, the emperor's reward of yanglianenzi might be weakened or even cancelled after the stability of the policy of returning military expenditures to the public treasury. At that time, they would have nowhere to complain. From this perspective, the return of military expenditures to the public treasury actually benefited the court the most, as it indirectly increased the court's tax revenue. For the local officials, it meant a reduction in their extra income. As for the common people, they still had to pay the same amount of taxes, but corrupt officials would take advantage of the reduced income by raising taxes and profiting from it. As for the reform of tax collection, it was another matter altogether, and it was complementary to the return of military expenditures to the public treasury. It did relieve the financial situation of the Qing dynasty, but it did not fundamentally solve the problem of corruption.